8 is the time now. As you know, there's a massive drive to make us all go green and indeed possibly to all go electric with our vehicles, and the government is getting behind it with some cash. Here with all the details, Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng joins me now. What is it that you're announcing, Secretary of State?
Hello, Nick.
Hello, sir.
Well,
go ahead.
It's a very good announcement.
I'll be the judge of that.
Announced today. Can you hear me?
Yes, I said I'll be the judge of whether it's good or not, Mr. Kwarteng.
Well,
I
think it's very good because a company called Britishvolt is going to make batteries for electric vehicles. And this represents something like £2 billion of investment. The vast majority of it is from the private sector. And it will create thousands of jobs just outside Newcastle in Blyth.
When you say thousands, do we have an idea of how many thousands, Secretary of State?
So on the main site itself, there are 3,000 jobs, and then there's a site just next to the factory, which is called the supplier park, and that means that companies that essentially supply the materials for the factory, the gigafactory, which makes batteries, those companies will employ up to 5,000 people. So altogether, you're looking at up to 8,000 jobs when the factory is up and running. And that's a huge economic opportunity for people living in the area.
And this is in Blyth, did you say, Secretary of State?
Yes, that's right.
And so this is all privately funded, or it's getting some level of government support? What's the situation there, Mr. Kwarteng?
There is a small amount of government support to the tune of tens of millions. But of course, the actual amount that's invested is north of £2 billion altogether. So the amount that we're putting in is dwarfed by the private investment that we're going to see.
And to my listeners who live in or close to that area in Northumberland, when might the jobs start to become available, Secretary of State?
So what they've said is that the factory, the first phase, will be completed by the third quarter of 2024. So that's 2.5 years. The site is an extraordinary site. I just was up there yesterday, and I was told, it was huge, but they said it's 50 football pitches, if you can imagine it. And it'll be the fourth largest building in the UK. So it's a really substantial piece of investment that we're very excited about.
Well, very exciting indeed. What sort of electric car do you drive again? Just remind me, Mr. Kwarteng.
I don't currently drive any car. I use a government car. The government car that I use is a hybrid.
Right.
So it's electric.
You don't run a personal car?
I don't in London, and haven't for many years.
Oh, right. Can we come to other matters? On the front page of one of the newspapers this morning, the Daily Mail, unions at war with Prime Minister over back to office. Boris Johnson faces what's called a fierce battle with some union leaders after they attempt to frustrate his drive to get Britain back to work. What would you say to possibly some of those union leaders? What would you say possibly some of those workers?
Well, I speak to union leaders frequently, as you can imagine, in my job, and I think we should get back to work. I've said that to the department that I run, BEIS, the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department, that we want to get back to work. We've got to get back to some degree of normality.
Some people are screaming at the radio, Mr. Kwarteng, I have been working. I've been working in my front room or my dining room or my kitchen. What is this man saying? We have been working. It's just we haven't been into the office. Don't take this the wrong way. He's old-fashioned. He wants us to take us back to the idea of some of the work mill.
I think that people working in the office do get benefits from working with colleagues, being able to interact directly with them. And I want to get back to a sense that, the pandemic is turning from a pandemic into what scientists, biologists call it's an endemic. So it's something we have to live with. And if we're going to live with it, I think the sooner we get back to the pre-COVID world, the better in terms of workplace practices. Now, even before COVID, people were working from home to an extent. But I think the culture where, people can share ideas in the office is a very healthy one. And all we're saying is that the guidance is now, we're back on a normal footing.
What percentage of your colleagues are back behind their desks in their respective offices in your department?
Well, we're trying to increase the number, and I'm hopeful that certainly in a few weeks we'll get people largely much back to the office.
Yes, I think a 5-year-old might notice that you didn't actually answer my question there, Mr. Kwarteng. What is the current percentage?
I don't know the exact percentage as of today. Clearly at the
what about last week?
Pandemic, it At the height of the pandemic, it was substantially lower. It was about 25%, I think. But
has it lifted from 25? But
I think it definitely has.
When you walk through your offices, do you think, we're about 50% in, we're about 60%? What is the sense you get? You must look at these things. You're business secretary, you're telling us all to get back to business, and it would appear you don't have a clue as to the percentage of your own staff who've actually.
I know the rough number. I don't have the exact.
Oh no, but what's the rough percentage?
So I would say it's about nearly 50%, but it's going to increase
nearly
over 50% the next few days and weeks.
So it's less than half, and you're expecting the rest of the country to get on their trains and buses.
So Nick, I hadn't been fully prepared for this questioning. I would have got the exact number for you if I knew that you were going to ask that, and I will get back to you on that.
Well, okay. You don't think that perhaps it would have been an idea to know that figure?
Well, I've learnt my lesson. Thank you very much.
I don't want to teach you lessons at all. Some people suggest that the government, you know that, some people suggest the government have been a little tardy on this. Perhaps I can play you the words of Stuart, now Lord Rose. You won't need reminding, but to remind my listeners, he of course successfully ran Marks and Spencer's as CEO. He's chairman of Asda. He said this to me yesterday.
Hallelujah. I've been calling for it for months. I cannot believe that we've sat here for so long. I am angry almost to the extreme. I've been going to work throughout the pandemic every single day. I've had COVID twice. I've had my 3 vaccinations, but and I'm a man of over 70. I cannot believe that we've got a nation sitting at home now, cowed by this government because they're fearful of this virus, which has been unpleasant, has killed a lot of people, but it is something we have to now live with.
How would you respond to a rather strident Lord Rose?
Yeah, he's strident. He's got his views, and I speak to lots of business owners and business entrepreneurs who think the same way. But we've got to strike a balance. Clearly, at the height of COVID, people felt uncomfortable about going to work, and that was entirely legitimate. And that's why we had the working from home guidance, because it was a very serious illness. I mean, Stuart Rose may have gone in every day, but there was substantial risk when this thing was running riot, and we didn't have a vaccine. So we've got to strike a balance between people like Stuart Rose, who think it's ridiculous that we should issue a guidance to work from home, and people who are saying now that they never want to go back into the office. I know it's a minority, but we've got to say, look, this was a serious thing. We dealt with it. People work from home. But now that we've got the vaccine rollout, the economy's opening, we should encourage people to get back to work. I think that's a balanced approach.
Can I get a word from you on another front page headline, which would seem to be potentially offering a lot of hope and indeed help to struggling listeners? The Daily Express saying there's cash help for millions in energy bills crisis. Millions of Britons could be in line for a £500 payout to help with the cost of soaring energy bills. How much are you aware of this initiative, Secretary of State?
I read about it in the newspaper, but as you will appreciate, I speak to Chancellor Exchequer, I speak to Treasury officials all the time. We're always looking at ways in which we can try and soften price rises, undue hikes in bills. And I'm sure there'll be more information about that in the next few weeks.
You sense it's a likely possibility?
Well, look, there are lots of measures that people have talked about. And ultimately, it's a matter for Rishi Sunak and his team at the Treasury. But I speak to him, my officials speak to their officials, and we're trying to get to some common solution. Having said all of that, there is already support that is provided. We've got the Warm Home Discount, which is gives very vulnerable people on very low incomes support for bills. There's also a winter fuel payment as well, which goes through the Department for Work and Pensions, and that also is targeted at people who may be struggling. So there's already existing support, but you're quite right to say that we're having conversations across government to see what more can be done.
And this issue may be helped a little bit by what I understand was a 1.2 billion cable connecting the British and French power grids, which I read in one of today's papers, today's Times, you have blocked. Why so?
Yeah. Well, it was on a planning, purely a planning issue about the local environment and safeguards on that. But you'll appreciate that the counterparty may well take us to court, and so it's not something that I want to comment on.
You can't go any further. All right. Lastly,
well, it would prejudice the.
No, I appreciate process. You can't. No, when I say you can't, you literally can't, because you might prejudice the outcome. No, I understand that. But one thing you can comment on are these swirling allegations of dark deeds, blackmail, scheming, whatever it might be.
Sure.
You know the Prime Minister. You know him professionally. You know him personally. You have a close relationship. Would you endorse tactics such as these, if I may use the word blackmail?
Not at all. Look, I've been an MP for 12 years. I've never heard of anything like that. Whips generally try and persuade MPs to support the government. There are ways that they do that, but I've never heard any suggestion that people were withholding funds. And actually, if you look at the process, anyone who knows anything about whips knows that they can't do that. They don't have it in their power to withhold funds or grant funds to local communities. That's done in an official way. It's done in a neutral way. It's done impartially. And it's completely irregular and unacceptable for whips to be suggesting to MPs that they won't get money for their schools and hospitals.
You'd have to be a brave person to try it, because I know you, but no one's ever attempted to bully you in any way, shape or form.
Not once.
No.
Well, generally my whips were a lot shorter than I was over the years, so I'm not sure how the physical intimidation or other forms of intimidation would have been effective.
Lastly, we all must look forward to the Sue Gray report. What do you hope it might produce that will keep Boris Johnson in position?
I think the Prime Minister enjoys the support of the Cabinet. I think we're 100% behind him. But obviously, as he said, we want to see what the report says.
I'm grateful for your time. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Kwasi Kwarteng, Business, Energy and Industrial Secretary, appearing here on LBC, where at 2 minutes after 8, news is next.
On your radio.